Hey, and welcome back. Michael Sumner is here from scoredetect.com, and we are going to find out directly from the source about this exciting new idea called blockchain timestamping. And we're going to find out about ways that business owners can improve their SEO using blockchain timestamping, proving content authenticity, and all the ins and outs and how it works in SEO in modern day with AI generated content. So Michael is here to maybe take something that could be kind of a geeky subject, but we'll make it accessible. We'll make it fun. We'll have a blast in it. So Michael, glad to be speaking with you.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Glad to have you. Yeah, you're very welcome. And so what should we know? Like if someone says, all right, score detect, blockchain timestamping, maybe I'm doing my research right. I'm looking on the YouTubes, on the podcast. They found this and they're like, all right, so let's find out from Michael, like what this is all about. What's the scuttlebutt, as the kids say? What's all the fuss about?
Sure. So the real issue with the feature is that we're relying on content that we see on the internet, but we have no idea if it's genuine or not based on certain proofs. So we're relying on those proofs, but those proofs can be faulty. And we've found so far that the blockchain is tamper-proof, secure, publicly available 24/7. But why aren't we using it today?
I don't know. We should, right?
We should be. But besides crypto, there are better applications for the blockchain, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Okay, so you're saying that the mainstream, the average person, they've heard about crypto and they know that blockchain's related to that, right? It's peer to peer. There's like the indestructible data, and because everyone has a copy or a slice of the ledger, then you'd have to kind of like take over 51% of like the whole network, millions of computers to change the financial records of the cryptocurrency. But then people say, well, hey, like money is kind of information, right? Money used to be gold coins and then paper. And then at one point they said, if you have $5 million, it doesn't actually exist. It's just like a stored record in a computer. And they said, well, let's distribute it. That way, one person can't change the records. And then you say, well, hey, now that it took us all this time for our brains to understand that, let's apply it to information, right? Let's apply it to say, well, hey, you put out. So here's the part we're trying to understand, right? When you say this, it sounds like, well, you put out this web page or this article on this date and it was by you. And now that it's kind of spread out, distributed peer to peer, no one else can change that record. Is that on the right track?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so tell me about it. Like, tell me about like how someone can use it. I mean, I know I gave like an example there, but like, is there someone that can use Score Detect, and then we can tell people about it, and they say, "Oh my gosh, like now I'm excited about it. This sounds exactly like something I should use."
Sure. So at its core, all you need is the file or the text that you need to upload to the blockchain. And we have a platform that allows you to do that and several integrations, which we can talk about in a moment. So that file or text is, you can say, the key. And once you do upload it to the platform, it heads straight to the blockchain, where since the blockchain code says it will never change, and that's written in the smart contract, which is a publicly available code for everyone to see, then you can only identify that if you have the key, also known as your file or text, the original file or text. And from the file or text, every file or text has a unique fingerprint or a hash, and you can associate that with what you see in the blockchain. So only you can be the one to prove that ownership. So we have different ways of displaying this, but then I can get into a moment on several applications, but the most useful application is for SEO purposes, which is quite interesting because that's just very recent in 2025.
Well, okay. Well, let me try to make sure I kind of recap and understand what you're talking about here. It almost sounds like registering like a copyright or a trademark, right? If you register, you're like, well, it's authored by me, and then I'm the one that did it first. So if someone comes later and try to say it's me, it's like, well, no, look, I was here first, and like patents, trademarks, copyrights, things like that, and And so I'm glad that you brought up this idea of like the public and private key, because like I'm a computer science major, computer programmer, and even I like, and like we took classes on cryptography, and even when Bitcoin and blockchain became a thing, I was like, okay, like there's all these metaphors, right? There's fingerprint this and hash this, and it's like it's one of those where then you kind of hear it over and over, and you get the idea that you put something on a blockchain and you get the private key, which kind of only you have, right? That kind of proves your ownership of it. And then there's the public key, which others look at, and that's kind of like anyone else can see it. And so in the Bitcoin terminology, it was like, well, if you have the private key, you can then like spend that Bitcoin, you can move it elsewhere. But then if anyone else has the public key, they can see that you have it. And so that's kind of like it takes so many iterations just to understand that part. And so you're saying that as far as score detect and this kind of peer-to-peer, not quite copyright registration, but similar idea, right? You publish this piece of content, you get the private key to like that no one else sees, but that proves that you own it. But then anyone else has that public key, and they can kind of look up like the public record. So, kind of about to move on to SEO. Is that part at least understood on the right track?
Yes, that's right.
All right, well, great. And so search engine optimization, right? We say that well when you want to rank for something, search engines want like the most relevant result. And then I know that when Google kind of became like more and more of an indexer, right? Like back in the days, websites were like directories, but then they started saying, well, we're going to spider stuff and like we'll decide what's relevant, and you don't have to give us the meta keywords so much anymore. We'll use our technology. Like there was a lot of like, well, what's the origination of this content, right? If I put out something on my blog, but then someone else like syndicates it, picks it up, like you'd hope that the original source gets the higher ranking. And so how does all of these ideas about like SEO and ranking and like keyword relevancy, how does this relate to score detect and these blockchain ideas?
Sure, and I'm glad you mentioned about the history of what Google used to do and what they're doing now. So what Google is doing now is that they focus on how the user would view the content in the least algorithmic way possible. That's their explanation. So there are 4 pointers to that. There's experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And you can see that with the advent of AI generated content, we're seeing that there can be misinformation. There can be information that appears to be true, but yet it can be slightly misleading, slightly false, or hallucinated. But the way that it's written is professional or is well written, as if a human editor would have written it. So then it's up to us to figure out if that is true or not. And how are we able to identify if that source is trusted in the first place, besides saying that it's maybe a popular website that we would then, well, we were used to knowing to be reputable. So what we need is a way to bring it back to the user and for themselves identify through a link on, let's say for the article, you can add a verified by score detect, which you click on that link and it heads straight to the certificate, which has a set of proofs, which then ultimately leads to the blockchain transaction so that you can base off the change in the content or not. So what I found recently is that Google themselves are way more capable than we've expected. Their web scrapers can click through different parts of your website. And let's say you have a Twitter link on your footer. Google is able to determine automatically that your website is associated with that Twitter profile. And that's not only something that you can see. I noticed that when I use the Google Ads AI, Google is much more capable in search, and we see that with the secret algorithms that they do have, and that SEO agencies try to find out before they then change it every 3 months or so. But the future is trustworthiness, and so far we've found that to be through the blockchain.
Well, okay, and so I mean, it's always easy to forget some of these SEO principles, especially if you don't revisit them enough, right? Like we a lot of us have heard about, like, have a fast loading page, or have a good heading and structure and stuff like that. But then the whole idea of EEAT, I love it because it's kind of like it's hidden about as far as how it all works and like how deep the scraping goes, kind of like you're saying. And it's always fun to think about like the connection of your site to social media, and then the connection of yourself to other people, right? Like you hear about how there's like the structured data or whatever. And so if you are in like a roundup post, or if you're in like a Forbes article, and there's kind of like the hidden stuff about like your social handles, it's like, well, if you are like speaking authoritatively about some like technical issue, and if your social media then goes and shows that you post regularly on social about like those the same kind of technical issues in your industry, and your peers with other respected people, then it's like, okay, we'll rank this person higher versus the AI generated content, somebody like messing stuff up. And so as far as the way that all this all connects to score detect, so you say that like you have a piece of content and there's like a verified by score detect that they can kind of click and verify. It reminds me of like when you would go to a checkout page and there'd be like the shield, right? There'd be all these like trust kind of companies that say like, hey, like this is they're up to date, they're kind of still like legitimate. And so how is this catching on? Because like many times there's you can create an amazing solution, but then getting people to actually use it, that's kind of another hurdle to climb. And so how is it going as far as getting people to like take the EEAT seriously and getting people to put these badges on their site?
Sure. So we have SEO agency owners using Score Detect today for their clients, and how that's proving to be is that we have some clients using just Score Detect, or other clients using Score Detect and maybe a DMCA widget, and yet others also having a backup from archive.org. You can see that with a DMCA, that is a robust authority, and that's great to have it. But at the moment, the DMCA doesn't have a way to timestamp what is on the blockchain. Archive.org is a snapshot of your website or your webpage on a public library called archive.org. But yet, we've heard recent news, I believe it was October in 2024, that archive.org shut down because of a DDoS attack. So that's quite fragile in itself. And also the money that is needed to support such a large database. So we've seen applications with SEO through Score Detect. What I want to mention as well is that there is a proposal for structured data, a schema.org hash, and that is currently in proposal since 2020, and it does take a while, but we are not sure if Google is adapting it. But so there are 2 points to this: indirectly or directly affecting SEO. Indirectly is whether or not someone such as Google is using the structured data. We can know for sure that the user will or will not click the back button, which would then bring them back to the search results. So that would still affect the user experience. Directly is if Google does secretly implement the structured data for their scraping tools, but that's something that we don't know. But what we do know is that if we have proofs like what you mentioned about the checkout experience, having a set of proofs to help increase trust so that the user can then follow the next action, such as reading an article or completing a purchase. That's what we need in this day and age.
Yes, I 100% agree with you that there's definitely a gap in the marketplace, and you wonder about how there's so much information, right? They always say like, well, the most recent 2 years of humanity is like more information than all of humanity combined up to that point, and it's kind of scary to think about. And like internet's getting faster, the computation's getting faster, the cloud, the server farms, the AI, it's enough to make your brain hurt. And so you think that, well, there are changes coming. And if there's a need for this kind of thing to just like find the authenticity, the legitimacy in all the noise, then this is something that definitely should exist and be used and be adopted. And so as far as like the business side of things, right? It's like you mentioned about like archive.org, like huge, right? Costs a lot of money to maintain. And even all of these kind of free resources like Wikipedia, which are like, if Wikipedia went away for even one day, like people would freak out. Like we'd be like, what's happening to humanity? This is end times. And we kind of expect it to be free, right? Kind of like you said, archive.org is the library, but like public libraries in general, we've become accustomed to that sort of thing. And so, so how is the business model of Score Detect? Like, are you worried about like a free alternative happening? Are you on the path to making money? Like, how is all that part going?
Sure. So we've found competitors in the space. You can look them up by typing blockchain timestamping, but they all happen to be more expensive than us. The main reason why is because the blockchains they use are quite expensive to maintain. And for example, we have the Bitcoin blockchain. That's a well-known blockchain, but it's very slow, expensive, and ancient. So much that we don't even know who the founder is, so we cannot maintain it. We have Ethereum, but that's known to be quite exhaustive in its gas fees, depending on the time of day. So what I found is a blockchain that is eco-friendly. It's there to stay. It's used by multiple dApps or decentralized apps, and they've got a lot of funding. So we can see that there's an active community there. And so you have the blockchain aspect to make sure that this is all cost effective so that an average person here, like yourself listening, would be able to use such a service. Uh, we have the blockchain as gas free, and this allows us to have as minimal as possible. The only thing that I would have to charge for is the storage for a certificate. But even then, once you have your certificate created, which is simply a set of proofs from a timestamp that's been generated, you can then go and export that as a PDF and no longer need Score Detect if you wanted to. But for SEO reasons, I would need to maintain uh, a way for Google to view that piece of content as a certificate, because we cannot upload a certificate file into the blockchain where you can then view the file and its contents. But what we do have is the certificate hosted on the non-blockchain, but you can download it if you wanted to. And everything else, the service there is an API, and if you wanted to use it, there's also uh, usage fees for that. So besides that, we're keeping it as streamlined as possible so that we're cutting costs with the next cheapest competitor to be at least 2 times more expensive than us. So we're highly affordable.
Well, nice. Well, it sounds like you're on a path to world domination. And some of these keywords, phrases that we're mentioning, I mean, imagine if someone from 20 years ago heard what we're talking about, right? We're talking about like gas fees and sort of like offline wallets almost, right? Like that version of like, well, you don't want to store the certificate in the cloud or pay for it, and you can like save it for later. And it's all just like, the the speed of technology, it just continues to increase. But I love what you have going on. I love how you're looking at both the B2C route, but also the B2B, right? You're saying, well, we want individuals to use this for their SEO purposes, but how do we really get the widespread adoption really working? We go to the agencies and have them use it on their client sites. And so in these last few minutes of just having this really fun discussion, right, about Score Detect, about blockchain, about SEO, everything involved, there's always like a missing hidden question in any conversation that like I should be asking, but I don't always know because, we just met and we're just having this conversation. So is there any sort of like low hanging fruit, or is there something interesting that you just wish I would ask you and I just don't know what to ask you?
I'm thinking, I wonder, what do you think it is, Rob?
I don't know. Oh, I guess if we don't know, then the default usually for me is what's in store for the future. Like obviously you want to get more people using it, right? You want to make it like accessible and free or low cost, but is there any particular like feature or obstacle that you or just something exciting that's happening in the next year or two with this company that you see coming up?
Sure, so we do know that it's 2025. The service has just started in 2024, and we have yet to figure out if this is most useful for SEO agencies or if there's something even greater, such as a daily average person uh, trying this out to protect their ownership of either a digital asset, a file, or a text. There's just so many use cases here, and it applies to anything digital. So I'm really excited to see what other applications our customers and potential customers have in store for this general purpose technology.
I love it. And you think about that, that happens sometimes like MySpace became a music site, right? Who knows? Sometimes things like pivot that way and it's interesting. Like and you have to wonder if like Pringles, the potato chips or crisps to use your guys' term, you wonder if they started as like a tennis ball company, right? And so you say, well, we have our plan, we have our vision for what we think the future will hold, and we kind of make a solution. But then when people start using it in a certain way, we're like, hey, maybe there's something to pivoting to this other kind of method. So that's really interesting to think about, right? You might be kind of taken over in a way by all these customers who use it for this purpose or this niche. And so that's just all the more reason to talk to your customers and to stay ahead of the competition and see what's going on. That way you can get ahead of it and you can be the leader instead of you being the blockbuster trying to catch up to Netflix. And you're like, hey, we see this change coming. We will pivot our blockchain platform. And I think like one of the like people talk about blockchain to use for like land records and things like that, or like NFTs, what all that whole craze happened. And like I knew a lady who has a dating app, and then I guess both parties would go on a date and they'd both like consent to whatever they were doing, and it would be stored on the blockchain. Like, okay, if there's like legal problems later, he said, she said, you can go and look in the blockchain, and maybe that helps things. So it's just it's always fun, like the possibilities about what could happen. And so if someone says, all right, a lot of this sounds great, I want to try this out, I want to just like give it a go and upload a file and see how it works for SEO purposes or whatever, should they just go to scoredetect.com? What's the next step?
Sure, so we have a WordPress plugin, and you can simply search for blockchain timestamping. But what you can also do is visit scoredetect.com, sign up for an account there, and the onboarding process would guide you through how to create a certificate and how to integrate it either with your WordPress website or with 6,000 other apps on Zapier. Or if you wanted to, you can go very developer friendly and use our API to create, update, or modify the certificate.
Super cool. And so now I have like two new questions here in the last couple of minutes, because okay, so you say there's a WordPress plugin, and so how does that work? Is that just like you update or add new content and it just like automatically, as the kids say, puts it on your blockchain?
That's right. And for every revision of the post, or we can say post or of an article, then it would create a new timestamp as close as possible to when you updated that, so that then you have the proof of authenticity in the content itself. If we also extend it where there are several versions of that piece of content that then are fed into the blockchain as a chain of transactions. So all that history is there for anyone, whether it be a human being or a web scraper, to go figure out the authenticity of that piece of content. The more versions we can say is the better.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? To see how the like maybe something was scrubbed or something was updated, like for better or for worse, how that changed. And then as far as the API, have you seen anyone do anything interesting with that?
So there are several integrations with Zapier, and what I've found useful is that there are law firms, upon uploading a particular file or a document on Google Drive that then would trigger the certificate to be created. So there are several applications where by uploading photos, if you're a photographer, you can then timestamp that into the blockchain if it gets saved into Dropbox, for example. So there's lots of
Ooh.
tools, but again, people are figuring out how to use the service.
Well, hopefully you'll get bought out by Google at some point or something, right? They'll say, "Whoa, like this is so widely used. Instead of us making something from scratch, let's just contact Mr. Michael Sumner and let's say like people like photographers are using it, law firms are using it, SEO agencies are using it. Let's just plug it in and use it for SEO and EEAT purposes." And we hope that happens, right? We wish you the best in that department. And so scoredetect.com is the place to go. And before we let you go, Michael, it's time for one last quick thing. It's time to do the scary part of the show, try to put you on the spot, where we ask about a fun quote or lesson which has served you that you can pass on to us. So what comes to mind for you as far as a quote or lesson?
I'll start with pressure creates diamonds, but I'll also add in a world where AI can generate content at scale, the power of marketing lies not in the volume, but the authenticity and the human connection. So the brands that resonate will be those that tell genuine stories, build real relationships, and offer value beyond the algorithm.
100% separate the signal from the noise, get people what they want and deliver to them something that delivers real emotion, transformation, solves their problem. We're still dealing with people here, even though it is easy to push a button and generate a bunch of stuff. So if you're the kind of person that has a website, all of us, someone that generates content, any serious business, that should be all of us too, then look at scoredetect.com as far as getting your work saved, proven on the blockchain. There's the WordPress plugin, there's the API, there's the badges you can use, and maybe you'll see Score Detect used more and more around on the internet. So be one of those earlier adopters and be using it before your competition uses it. That's scoredetect.com, SCOREDETECT.com. Mr. Michael Sumner from scoredetect.com. Wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
All right, super.